Good evening and welcome to a Lord Mag special. Yes, I know Martin's shaking his head because turns up under the radar. We're all wondering where he was, and he sneaks on during the intro. We'll call you out, Chris. We'll call you out.
All I'm saying is if that was Peter Holly with him, he would have been on time. That's all I'm saying.
To be fair, mate, I'm always on the wire. Honestly, I am. How about you boys? Anyway, you all right?
Yeah, we're all right.
Oh, good, Chris. Oh,
good. So we've got a special guest again. He was on at the start of the January transfer window. The show came out with absolutely fantastic success and feedback. So we thought we would invite the legend that is Kieran Maguire back on to discuss all things FFP. Basically, now we know where we stand with our January spend, what it's going to entail going forward and stuff. So, welcome to the show, Kieran Maguire.
Thank you very much, guys. It's an honour to be asked back. I don't normally get many second dates. That's the story of my life.
Well, to be fair, Kieran, you did say that you like a podcast, you like to talk, so you're in the right place here, mate. So don't worry about it.
Grand, thank you very much.
So I think the best probably way to kick it off for anyone who may have missed the first show is, Kieran, can you give us a brief refresh of FFP?
Yes. If we start off with the Premier League profitability and sustainability rules, they say that over a 3-year period, and that 3-year period is constantly moving forwards. It's sort of you're always looking back over the last 3 years. You're allowed to lose a maximum of £15 million. And then if your club owners put in shares into the club, then that 15 million can become 105 million. So that's the position we're in. And a profitability and sustainability loss is different from the figures that you see in the accounts. So if you invest money in infrastructure, improve the stadium, better training facilities, better academy, that's all ignored. If you've got a women's team, that's ignored. If you've got community schemes, they're ignored. If you put money into the academy, that's fine. That's ignored as well. So you can actually lose a lot more money than the figures which are actually shown in the accounts. And in the case of Newcastle United, and I might upset some people for saying this, whilst Mike Ashley is clearly unpopular in Newcastle, the one thing that he did is that he left a legacy that Newcastle probably had £100 million worth of FFP profit when he left. So therefore you can go from that £100 million profit to a £105 million loss. So you've actually got extra spending to put through if that's the decision which is made by the owners. And I can't understand why they would buy the club unless they wanted to have Newcastle United competing.
Well, I'd like to say that off after all the moves they've made over the recent months, it looks like you're pretty much backing up what you've said there, Kieran. It looks like they're trying to make Newcastle a force to be reckoned with. So obviously we touched on it during the first show that the rumoured spend was roughly there was rumours going to be Newcastle were looking to spend something like 200 million over the first the first 3 windows. You would potentially worked out on another podcast with T4 Football that Newcastle over the next 4 windows, 4 years, could potentially spend up to 800 million by the time you incorporated like any commercial deals they may sign up during that time and stuff like that. So obviously we're in a position now that we know how much Newcastle spent on transfers over the January window. So first of all, we brought in obviously the 5 signings. Obviously one was on loan, so that doesn't really incur anything towards the FFP spend because it's more about just you pay the wages pretty much while they're on loan. But 4 permanent signings. Kieran Trippier, it came in the first week of January for a transfer fee of 12 million plus add-ons on a 2.5-year deal. If anyone's wondering, there is reasons why we're bringing in what the contracts are, because obviously that'll help break down some stuff during the conversation. The following week, Chris Wood joined for 25 million. And obviously, we got Matt Target on loan, but obviously we'll not be really discussing much on that tonight. Then the big splash of the window, Bruno Guimaraes came in from Lyon, rumoured to be a £33 million deal plus add-ons on a 4.5-year deal. Regards Wood, sorry, I forgot to mention it was a 25 million deal on a 2.5-year deal. And then in the final days of the windows, much to Kieran's disgust, we raided Brighton for Geordie Dan Burn on a 2.5-year deal, £13 million. So roughly with the add-ons, it was £83 million basic spend plus add-ons, which is rumoured to take it to just over about 92 million spend over that January window. So briefly explain to us what you would take on that sort of spend and how you think it could entail towards next, because I just a little bit further than I've actually broke it down how I'm thinking I interpreted it correct from when we spoke on the last show. Obviously, we'll get into that in a minute, but then obviously you can correct us if I've gone wrong on that.
The numbers are clearly correct. As far as the impact on financial fair play is concerned, we enter this horrible world of amortization, and what you do is that you take your transfer fee and you spread the transfer fee over the life of the contract. So Kieran Trippier, say that's 12 million over a 2.5-year contract, that works out as 5 million a year. So as far as this second half of the season, he's only there for 6 months. So you take that 5 million, multiply that by 6/12. So it's effectively an FFP cost of 2.5 million plus his wages. The same for Dan Burn, the same for Chris Woods. Clearly, the lad from France, he's on a 4.5-year contract. So let's say that's 32 million over 4.5 years. That's only costing you £7 million a year in the accounts. So there's still an awful lot of flexibility. There's an awful lot of leeway as far as the club is concerned. And I think they're all. I don't know much about football, but in my view, they're all solid signings. And the good thing is, they're not going to be taking up a. Are they going to win you the Premier League? Probably not. But the fact that you've got Matt Target for 6 months, you've got 3 of those lads on 2.5-year contracts, they're going to keep you up. That's going to solidify the position for the club. And when it comes to the summer, I think the club's in potentially a very strong position, because it's got the owners who want to spend the money. If it's got the right management structure, because you don't want to end up having a sort of hit and miss situation. If you think about what happened when Abramovich came to Chelsea, signing players like Crespo. If we take a look at Manchester City, they signed Joe. I think he scored 1 league goal in 2.5 years. Robinho, pretty up and down, and that's not just his football life, of course. And there were quite a few others who didn't work out. So I think the sensible thing to do is not to try to go from there to there instantly, but to build up and to have a structure and to have people at the club who know what they're doing, because what Amanda Staveley will find is that she's got a friend for every pound that PIF have got to spend. And that's the concern, that you'll have big agents coming in saying, "Oh, don't worry about the players. We'll sort out the players for you." And of course, they'll direct the club towards their clients, who won't necessarily be what's best for Newcastle United Football Club. Yeah,
I think we've all as a channel, we've been pretty aware that Newcastle were going to shop sensibly. They weren't going to, just because they had all this spend. And there was quite a few members of the fan base calling for marquee signing here, marquee signing there, this, that, and the other. But I think as a channel, we were pretty realistic, as into it was going to go down to more Premier League experience, and we may get 1 marquee signing. And then to be pretty much, we said between 5 and 7 transfers we thought, which it could have got to that stage on the last day, but obviously a couple of deals fell through on the last day. But all of the the deals that we went through were sensible Premier League experienced players. And as you said, Kieran, they're not going to set the world alight probably apart from Bruno Guimaraes. The rest of them are, the short-term experience, which is going to help Newcastle in the here and now, stabilise themselves as a Premier League force for the next year or so, and then obviously we can build around them and enhance the size of the squad as well. I think one of the things that we also were really impressed with Newcastle, especially the hierarchy, because nobody really has any experience of running a football club, and there's nobody in there in the management, in the boardroom level at the moment. Obviously, Jamie Rubin had a brief role at QPR, but were you surprised how good the business was by Newcastle under those circumstances, and also the fact that they didn't actually, bend to any other teams, demands as such, where they were put a lot, there was a lot of bids. If you want them, we're going to go. They didn't cripple. They stuck to the guns, and said, we're not going to be put over a barrel here and bent over sort of thing.
Yeah. There's always a danger with new owners that clubs suffer from giddiness, and they get overexcited. I think you've got to give the manager some credit. He identified where the weaknesses were in conjunction with other people at the club, and you build from the back, and that's what they did. I think Trippier's a bargain myself. Remember, he scored in a World Cup semi-final less than 4 years ago. Yeah. So, and you don't go to Atletico Madrid if you're useless. So yeah. I think that was a really good signing, really good price. They've got. You've seen him in 2 matches. I've seen him for a few years now with Big Dan Burn. Hugely underrated player because people see the giraffe and they judge him as being a giraffe, but he's really competent on the ball. He's not actually as good in the air as you think he would be, but he's much better on the ground. So I think you sort out the back, you stop conceding goals, and then it makes it that much easier. If you don't just score 2 goals to win, then life is a lot simpler. And I think the club, hierarchy deserves credit for that. Matt Targett, again, solid player, and he's the type of player that will always give you a 7 out of 10, and that's what you need. Because all you need to do is to, we're at Brighton. We were at Watford 10 days ago. They were dreadful. But then we were dreadful against Burnley. So sorry about that.
Thanks for that.
Thought,
we'll skip by that one.
Yeah. I've had so many people contact me yesterday saying, "You do realise what you've done to our ACCAs?" Because we were home bankers. Right. Apologies for that. If you're upset, I'm 10 times in a bad morning.
I wouldn't be disgusted. I think there's quite a few people annoyed with Aston Villa as well, but that's what it is, isn't it? On the weekend as well. See, Chris will probably back you up on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think the signings have done Newcastle good, and they'll be good for you next season as well. So you can look to boost other places, and then those players will be Wood, Burn, and Trippier will then be in the final year of their contract, and you could be potentially looking to replace those particular positions. But it's given you a solid basis at a relatively cheap price, and also the most important thing is you can't take anything for granted. You must be far more confident of being able to go into this summer's transfer window as a Premier League club, and that means you will not be able to get marquee signings in the Championship, and also you don't want marquee signings in the Championship because it's Saturday, Tuesday, and it's. If you look at some of the clubs that have come down, such as Stoke recently, who had a few fancy Dans, and not the type of Dans that you've recruited, a few fancy Dans in their squad, they were absolutely slaughtered because they couldn't do it. Play at home at Saturday and then play away at Cardiff or Reading on a Tuesday night.
Yeah. I think one of the things we'll go down into the deals of each, the breakdown of each deal. So obviously we've got Kieran Trippier who came in first. As I mentioned, it was a 12 million deal. So it was a 2.5 year contract. Now, you might correct us on. I think you might do on the amortization on it, Kieran, but I roughly worked it out. It probably was it 4.8 million per season. Would that work? Sound about right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then on the Chris Wood, he was at 25 million. So with a 2.5 year deal, that I've got that as about 10 million per season.
Correct.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You'd be stealing my job here, Rich.
Yeah. You're just a good teacher. That's all. I'm going off the first show. That's all. I worked out for Dan Burn. Obviously, he was a 13 million as well, 2.5 year deal. Roughly about 5.2 million per season.
Yeah.
And then Bruno Guimaraes was 33 million. Obviously, with add-ons on that 4.5, which would roughly be about 7.34 million a year.
Yeah. All good. That's right. All four of those. Yeah. Sound.
So just to obviously help the understanding of the amortization over the next few years, I worked that out that for the next 2.5 years for FFP, that's only carrying roughly about 27.35 million. Does that sound right?
That's right. Yeah.
So if that's the sort of figure we're carrying for at least the next 2.5 years, what does that roughly then make out we could possibly spend over the next 2.5 years then?
Well, we don't know which players are going to leave, and every time a player leaves, all of the profit goes into FFP immediately. So, football accounting is crazy. When you buy a player, the cost of the player is amortized over the life of the contract. When you sell a player, all of the profit appears immediately. So, how this is going to leave players like Almiron and so on. They might become peripheral. They might start to look for things elsewhere. So I think as far as the future for profitability and sustainability is concerned, you've got to look at two things. Can the club generate more money? And what is the maximum spend in terms of wages and amortization? In terms of generating more money, I don't know whether you've been observing what's been happening at Manchester City, but recently they've been announcing lots and lots of small deals. And a lot of those deals taking place in the Middle East.
Yeah, I believe that I think it was around the last time we were on. Hadn't they just signed a deal for the official hotel in the Middle East or something? Was that right, Kieran?
Yeah. And it's $1 million, it's 2 million, and they've got I think 11 deals now in the Middle East. I think from Newcastle's point of view, with the with cartel in the Premier League, trying to prevent any competition. That really is the way forward. It makes it very difficult for the Premier League to say that the deals are overvalued if there's lots of small deals taking place. There's the issue of naming rights, which I know is a sensitive issue. And it's your club, it's not my club. If you can get an extra 5 or 6 million a year from that pays a player's wages. Now, whether you feel that warrants giving up the name of St James's Park, and let's face it will always be St James's Park.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to bear in mind, because it's not a new stadium. We've got the Amex at Brighton, and it will always be the Amex. When I go to Bolton, I still call it the Reebok.
Yeah,
I don't. When I go to Coventry, I call it the Rico, even though it's the Coventry Building Society. So, St James's Park. And we know that there were other reasons for not calling St James's Park something else. I won't even mention the words. It's a bit like Harry Potter. You don't mention somebody's name.
Yeah.
But I think the stadium thing, though, Kieran, is something we need to become used to, because I would imagine that with people we're bringing on board, and the way that the ownership are bringing people in, obviously there's been a job advertised recently for certain legal beagles to join the club with regards to revenue and contracting. So I think that the renaming of the stadium, to me, it's always going to be St James's. They can call it the Saudi Park Hotel at St James's for whatever I care. But if that generates 40 or 50 million over 3 seasons, then I think that's something as a club with the current ownership that we're going to need to get used to, because I think they're going to need to do the things like that to bring the club to the levels. And, I'm sure the training ground, when it's redone, developed, or anything else, it will all be named something. There'll be sponsorship that links to all of that. So I think we just need to be realistic. And, as you said, stadiums will still be what they are to us.
Exactly.
But, they're not. If you look at Arsenal moving and everything else, the Emirates and other stuff, it's still high. There's probably a lot of Arsenal fans still going to Highbury when they're heading off for the weekend. So it's, I kind of get that. The sentiment I think we need to maybe release. I think what will become a bigger problem for people will be if they make a decision to move St James's Park for a bigger ground or whatever. So, but that's, we'll see what happens with that. But
yeah, that's a long way down the line.
Yeah.
Exactly. If Newcastle are competing in the Champions League in 5 years' time on a regular basis, and all of a sudden you think that you need a 65,000 capacity stadium, that's a decision to be made. But that's a nice decision to be made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, as somebody that's been through a stadium move, has been through a few stadium moves, it is sentimental, but actually, it's the club and it's the goals and it's those moments with friends that you will remember. And I still remember, incidents at the Goldstone ground. Those memories have not gone away, and they will never go away if you have a stadium move. And our new stadium, compared to the old one, is chalk and cheese. The facilities are so much better. And if you're getting more, then I think people will be willing to accept it. Sometimes we're too focused on sentiment. If you get an extra 15,000 seats in, then that's an extra £5 million a year. Plus, you've got all the extra hospitality that allows you to go into the transfer market. And Newcastle will not be in a position where they will be able to dominate. It won't be the same as when Chelsea came in with Abramovich and Manchester City had Sheikh Mansour, because there was no financial fair play. So if you want to compete with them, you've got to have the facilities and the infrastructure to be able to start to match those clubs. And there is a significant gap between Newcastle United and those clubs for a variety of reasons, one of which is lower capacity as far as the stadium is concerned. Secondly is the quality of the facilities. Thirdly, it's the number of matches being played, because if they're playing 5 or 6 matches a season in the Champions League, and you can make £5 million a pop in a big stadium, that gives them a £30 million head start over you.
Yeah. Do you know what, Kieran? I think you're absolutely right. And I'm not too, like Martin said, I'm not too concerned over the stadium changing name, because as we all know, last time when it was changed, like you say, we won't talk about it, but that was done in a certain way where we knew that it wasn't to the benefit of the club, it was to the benefit of the individual. Whereas this time around, if again, as Martin said, you could put anything on the front of it, but this ownership know what St James's means to the fans, to the city. They know that the chances are we're going to still call it St James's. So it's more from a commercial point of view, and and if it helps us move forwards as a football club, and it helps us put better players on the pitch, have better facilities, and just increase our revenue in general, then I think a lot of supporters would be fully behind the move. I don't think anyone would object to it. It's when, for example, we had all those Sports Direct signs everywhere. And then obviously the stadium name change itself. We all knew that that was being done for a certain someone's benefit, and it wasn't for the benefit of the club. And that's what all Newcastle fans have said all along. And then it just so happens, doesn't it, that in the past week or so, we found out that even the advertising that was all around the stadium, there was no payments made in 3 years. Not that anybody's surprised by that, but it just highlights exactly what was wrong with the previous regime.
I think as we talk about the naming rights now, I think a lot of the Newcastle fans, as was already touched on there, wouldn't necessarily be bothered if the name was changed. Obviously, we've got in Chester Street where I live, we've got the Durham County Cricket Ground, which obviously England play at occasionally. And what they've done is they've actually went and called it Emirates at the Riverside Stadium. So I think, if Newcastle went and called it, say, Aramco at St James's Park or Saudi at St James's Park, I think a lot of Newcastle fans, if it was, as you touched on one of your tweets last week, there was Newcastle tipped to make 40 million by renaming it St James's Park. If we were going to make that sort of money just by putting Aramco or Saudi at the front of at St James's Park or something like that, I think all the fans would be for it. Now, the other thing I wanted to actually ask you about that tweet you mentioned last week, and because we briefly touched on it last time on the last show, when we discussed stuff like, I don't know if you remember this tweet as well, Kieran, where you said Newcastle have a stadium that is 90% of capacity of City and Liverpool, so presumably Newcastle can have deals up to 90% of the value of those clubs. City had a commercial income of 246 million in 2020 compared to Newcastle 26, so a lot of scope to grow, surely, to be fair. So just like the first aspect is 40 million a realistic figure for where Newcastle are now, and compared to other naming rights at other, like say Arsenal, they've got the Emirates, and you've got Man City with the Etihad and stuff like that?
I think £40 million over 4 years. Yes, I think you struggle to get £40 million a season unless you're competing in Europe at the highest level. So there's certainly scope to generate money to put into the kitty to allow the club to accelerate, because that allows you to recruit at a higher level. And whether we like it or not, football is now a game of talent, where if you want to get better talent, you've got to pay better wages. And I've got a graph which shows, you've got Chelsea and Manchester City at one end of the table paying the highest wages in the Premier League, and then you've got Watford and Norwich paying the lowest wages in the Premier League, and chances are they're going to go down. So how do you get up that wages table? You have to get them extra money coming in. So £40 million a season, it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work.
Sorry, I'm going to say, I think you said it was over a 10 year period. So it wasn't. So it was an extra 4. Was it 4 million a year or something? I think you said over 10 years. 4 million a year. Is that in Football Insider?
Yeah.
No,
I do so many interviews. I lose. I've got no idea what I've said in most of them. Yeah, so 4 million a year.
I think you wanted to get in there, Martin. Did you?
I did. Yeah. Really sorry to interrupt. A couple of things. So firstly, I just want to do a quick shout out. Dave, anybody, obviously, a while back, obviously we had the passing of Chris A. Just to let people know that there is a memorial on April the 1st at 18:30, so 6:30 p.m. at the Goodnow College in London. So anybody that's in and around that area that wants to attend the memorial, his family would love as many black and whites in there as possible. But there is a Zoom link. It's also going to be done online. So I've got some details from Dave, and I'll try and circulate them later on. But if anybody wants the link, reach out to me or one of the boys, and we'll send it on to you. We'll try and get that. But the other thing is I need to shoot off. So I do apologize to Kieran. I've had a couple of unwell children the last week. And unfortunately, my daughter has just tested positive for COVID. So I've got a bit of a family drama going on. So I'm going to have to split because it's upset her. So we're going to go and sort that out now. But I will catch up the show later on. And Kieran,
take care.
Always good to talk to you. Yeah, I'm going to go, but I'll talk to you boys later. I'll let you know what's
going on. Take care, Mark.
All right, thanks, boys. Cheers. Talk to you soon.
Right, so that's all right. No, but I wasn't checking the chat. Actually, I was just making sure I had all my facts right. So then all of a sudden, there's these on the private chat is going ting 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 ting. I completely missed the chat, so I do apologise, Martin, for that. So sorry, we talked about the 4 million a year possibly naming rights. So would you say that over a 10-year period, do you think there's a scope where it could be done over a shorter term and get more to increase the commercial revenue, or is that just roughly where Newcastle are at now?
Well, that came from a branding company. Now, if you take a look at where Manchester City are compared to 10 years ago, where they were in 2010 to where they are in 2020, not the same club at all. In terms of expectations, of terms of quality of play, and that means that they can go into the market and to demand more. I think if Newcastle have got any sense, sponsors like the idea of a long-term relationship. So to a certain extent, you've got to give them what they want. If Newcastle persuade them to sign a deal which rewards success, so top half of the Premier League, we get an extra such and such. Qualifying for the Europa League, you get an extra 1 million. Qualifying for the Champions League, you get an extra 3 million. Getting into the quarterfinals or beyond of the Champions League, and if they do that, the sponsors will be happy because they're getting the profile on the back of that, and that also protects the club, because what you don't want to do is to be locked into a long-term deal at where we are at present, which is bottom 6 Premier League prices for a club which in 5 years' time could be competing with the big 6. So I would suggest that anybody that's involved, and this is where, in terms of the recruitment that we were talking about earlier, is having somebody with experience, with potentially, ideally, a legal background, so therefore they can monitor the contracts. They can go. They'll know what to look for in terms of the small print. All of these things work for the benefit of Newcastle United.
So, do you happen to know how much the Etihad pay Man City for the rights for their stadium by any chance, Kieran?
It's a £350 million 10-year deal for both front of shirt and naming rights, was my understanding.
So it's
so how much of that was for the stadium and how much of that was for the shirts? Almost impossible to split. I know at Brighton we've signed a £100 million deal with Amex, and that is for both front of shirt and stadium naming rights, and that's over an 11-year period. So that works out around about 9 million a year. So it's difficult to work out perfectly.
Yeah, Dan Ashworth knows how to get a good deal.
I think that's part of Dan's job.
Yeah, it is, but everything.
Yeah.
I think the only reason why I asked that because obviously the Premier League put in the rule about deals with linked parties, and then there was a stop put to that. I think the main reason I want to bring it up was because looking at how much obviously Man City are getting for the Etihad, I think it was 350 million you said there for a shirt and stadium sponsor. Was that over? Is that a 10-year period? Or
it was over, I think, 10 years. Yeah,
10 years. That. So, if say for example, Newcastle obviously are looking to be changing the shirt sponsor because obviously Fun 88 is not allowed in the Middle East, so that's obviously it's a gambling sponsor. So obviously, I know this is probably pie in the sky at this moment in time. But with our stadium being, as you mentioned in the previous one of your tweets last year with regards to capacity of stadiums and stuff like that, we've got a similar capacity to Manchester City. Where would you think, if we were to do a name and rights and for the shirt and for the stadium, whereabouts do you think we could actually realistically target? Bear in mind, you've just obviously said 100 million for 11 years for Brighton for the Amex, and then 350 for Etihad for Man City in the stadium and shirt. Where do you think Newcastle could gauge because obviously just to fall in with that, linked parties as well, so it keeps everybody in the league happy, so to speak? Well,
let's be honest about the pecking order in the Premier League. Newcastle are a bigger club than Brighton. And that's not an issue, for me to say that as a Brighton fan. Nobody in Brighton is going to disagree with me on that. So therefore, it's got to be higher than where we are at present. If we take a look at Newcastle's, and I'll just looking at my spreadsheet here. If we take a look at Newcastle's total commercial income in 2007, it was £28 million. And if you look to see how clubs have grown, you'd have expected that to have doubled, potentially trebled. but under Mike Ashley in 2019, it was still £28 million. So there was a huge lost opportunity during the Ashley regime to capitalise, to monetize, a horrible word, to monetize the Newcastle United brand. And again, you know, I'm using language here which I don't like because I'm a football fan from the terraces, the same as you. But I think the new ownership are keen to develop that. I think sponsors will be willing to become involved with Newcastle because they'll see it as an exciting project. Clearly, there is the opportunity to sign deals with commercial partners in the Middle East as well. So if we take a look at the overall 29 million pounds as to where we are now, Everton are mid-70s. Newcastle should be at least on par with Everton, surely.
Yeah.
The problem that you're going to have is that the whatever you want to call them, the cartel, the sneaky six, the closed shop brigade, and we all know who we're talking about. They will do everything in their power to maintain their top six positions because they know that under the new form of Champions League, there's a good chance that English clubs could have 6 teams in the Champions League in 2025, and they want to keep those positions for themselves. And the value of the Champions League is going up and up, especially when we hit 2025. Potentially, you could be looking at a minimum of 40 to 50 million pounds from qualifying for the Champions League. And if you think about it, it's a bit like doing an 800 meters race. If somebody's starting off 200 meters ahead of you, you can be faster than them, but you've still got a hell of a lot of catching up to do. And they will use every means within their power, both fair and foul, to keep Newcastle's commercial income as low as possible.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's obviously clever how you try to get extra money into the club and around sort of stuff like that. Obviously, we mentioned briefly about obviously this was like in the summer of last year. I can't remember if you remember this tweet at all, but it was Mike Ashley Strawberry Place, Newcastle Limited, had made a profit of over $5.5 million by selling the property for $9 million when he bought it for 3.4. Now, I don't know if you remember that one, but just a bit of an update, obviously, because it can help with the name and rights, obviously, if we know what's going forward. The company that actually bought it from Mike Ashley went bankrupt over the COVID period when there was lockdown and stuff like that.
Oh, right.
So the company actually went bankrupt. So there is a few things going on where we believe that with the Reuben side of things, with the Reubens having a fantastic relationship with Newcastle Council for a lot of the they've redeveloped a lot of Newcastle, like Pilgrim Street, Dean Street and stuff like that. And also they own the race course at Newcastle as well. It could be something where Newcastle might be able to approve the Reubens buying the land for the club and buying it back. So that could help with the, possibly redevelopment of St James's Park going forward on the Gallagher end. There was a lot of plans originally said about having possible hotels linked into it on the site. And so that's something that obviously when it comes to do any name and rights for stadium, which I think any potential sponsor would obviously be intrigued in as well, because there's more room for extra sponsors, directors boxes and stuff like that. So that's something definitely keep an eye on going forward. But just a thing I wanted to touch on as well, Kieran, you actually put a tweet out which intrigued us a few weeks ago, and that was regards the one share for 40 million. I don't know if you can remember this one a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it was the United
you
share.
You
United
stalk me
Limited.
more than my ex does.
If it's all irrelevant, we've got to do it. You know what I mean? It's obviously we want to put it out there for people who might not have seen the tweets and just want to know what's going on. So obviously this came out, and we were all intrigued by it. And then obviously you followed it up back with the tweet saying that Newcastle have 7,989,941 shares in issue. So if all was sold for 40 million, it was roughly going to be valued the club at 319 trillion. So obviously when it was broke down, we're all like scratching our heads going, what does this actually mean? So, Kieran, please explain.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that 319 million trillion, which to show that something very strange was taking place here. Under the arrangement between PIF, the Reuben brothers, and Amanda Staveley, PIF wants to have 80% of the club. The other two parties want to have 10% each. And this potentially does give a problem. Let's say that the club wanted to raise an extra £400 million. So under normal circumstances, you would say, well, PIF need to put in 320, Amanda Staveley needs to put in 40, Reuben brothers need to put in 40. Now, Amanda Staveley doesn't have 40 million quid sitting in a bank account. Yeah, we all know that. That's not a criticism. I've not got 40 million pounds sitting in a bank account either, and I suspect, and I'm not trying to upset you here. I don't think you lads have got either. So that's where we are. So what they did, and I think this was actually quite clever, was that PIF said, we will buy one more share, and we will give you 40 million pounds for that one share. And that means they've still got 80% because you've got 8 million shares in issue, and the other two have still got their 10%, and the club has got the cash. So everybody wins. The club can go into the transfer market, and that 40 million pounds helped to fund those deals that we've just been talking about. The minority shareholders don't have their investments diluted, because an alternative to issuing one share for 40 million pounds would have been to issue 40 million shares for £1 each. But if all of those shares had gone to PIF, all of a sudden, when you work it out as a share of the whole pie, PIF would have ended up with 94, 95%, and the Staveley and Reuben brothers 2.5% each. They're going, hold on, this wasn't the deal that we signed up for. So this is actually quite a cute legal way of keeping everybody happy. The club has got a better chance of avoiding relegation because it's got the cash to go into the transfer market. Amanda Staveley and Reuben brothers, they feel that they still own 10% of the club each. And PIF, hey, 40 million quid. It's
drop in the ocean.
Well, yeah. Let's face it. We've all seen the price of unleaded go up recently. That's they're just putting an extra 2 pence a litre on, and the rest of the country are paying for that.
Yeah. So that was completely news to us, and it shocked us what you've explained there. But how does that relate to the way that the linked third party deals and stuff like that? Because obviously, how does that look to the cartel and other teams and stuff? That obviously you've mentioned it's a legal way of doing it, but what will they think of the deal?
There's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do to stop investors putting money into clubs. Even if it's
one share for 40 million. I'm just obviously trying to.
No, take a look at the Football League handbook. Well, no, don't.
George,
you'll be,
get on that, George.
Yeah, there's a few pages, and none of them are exciting. But there's nothing to stop a shareholder buying a new share in a club for as much money as they choose to put in. But remember, only the first £90 million of cash over a 3-year period counts towards FFP.
Wow. Just while you actually mentioned that, I thought this was a good one to relate as well about. You'd mentioned just because a few people, obviously, we were talking about if Newcastle decide to buy, build training facilities and stuff like that. Just for everyone else to realise that the first 90 million of equity contributes towards FFP. Just obviously, do you want to explain that to people who might not know what that means?
Yeah. If PIF decide to put £300 million of cash into Newcastle United, and it's up to the club to spend it as it sees fit, only the first £90 million of that is included in your FFP calculation. So the other 210 million, if that money's spent on infrastructure, that's fine, because that's another exclusion from FFP. If that money's spent on the academy, again, that's excluded. So it's simply some fans of other clubs have said you cannot put limitless amounts into a club. You can put as much money into a club as you see fit, but not all of it counts towards your FFP allowance.
Good. That's
So
nice to know.
if we take a look at Spurs, if Spurs owner had put in £1 billion into the new stadium, that would have been fine. And because it's infrastructure, it all counts towards, infrastructure spend is exempt from FFP. So the fact that it's more than £90 million is an irrelevance. It's what the money's spent on.
Right.
That you get not the £90 million is for general wages, transfers, overheads, that type of stuff.
Brilliant. I hope that clears it up for anyone who was unsure about that. Now, one thing that I have to cover in FFP, hopefully it's not going to happen, but, touch wood, it doesn't look like it's going to happen like it was a few weeks ago. If we were to get relegated, the costs of relegation is 55 million TV million and about 10 to 20 million commercially. That's quite a substantial hit for getting relegated, isn't it?
It is. I did some calculations for somebody else earlier today. And if we take a look at clubs over the course of the last 4 to 5 years, it's a massive hit. You've then got issues in terms of wages, because if you've got £55 million less coming in next season, you need to get your wage bill down at the same time, which is, from your perspective as fans, isn't what you want to hear. And would Dan Burn have come from a club which is in the top half of the Premier League to join Newcastle and accept a clause in his contract that should Newcastle be relegated, he's got to take a 40% pay cut? I don't think he would. It's the same with Chris Wood. So, there is often talk about relegation clauses. Attracting players in the January window is practically impossible if you're going to put through huge pay cuts for them should the club go down. So if the worst happens, you then have you've got to come up straight away. You can survive 1 year in the Championship, and the rules in the Championship are as follows. Again, they look at you over a 3-year period, and they say in that 3-year period, for each year in which you've been in the Premier League, you're allowed to lose 35 million. And for each year in which you're in the Championship, you're allowed to lose 13. So in your first year in the Championship, you'd say 35 plus 35, you've got 70 million from the Premier League, plus 13 is your allowable FFP loss. You're allowed a loss of 83 million. Then it gets worse. Then it goes 35 plus 30. So it goes from, it drops to 61 and then it drops to 39. So you get the worst of both worlds. You're losing money from your parachute payments, and you're losing how much you're allowed to lose from an FFP point of view. It's an absolute nightmare. And it's caused an awful lot of problems for those clubs that don't bounce back straight away. But the number of clubs that are coming back after 2 years are actually pretty few and far between.
Yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of Newcastle fans, when we're looking 4 to 6 weeks ago, we're saying it's not the worst thing if we were to go down. I agree with that to a degree. You've just got to make sure we do what we would have done the last couple of times and come straight back up the. But yes, we've got a lot more money now, and that still doesn't. You've still got to recruit right to get out of the division. So I would rather not take that chance. And luckily, with the way the spending has gone over January, and the way we're starting to turn that on the pitch now, fingers crossed, it looks like it's going to work in our favour and we're going to stay in the division this year. I think that's actually quite a good time. Daz, you've been marking some questions that have come in from the viewers, because obviously we're getting to the last 10 minutes towards of the show now. So do you want to, pick 3 or 4 questions out there that we haven't covered?
First of all, I want to go to Mike's comment and say happy birthday to his youngest son, Louis, who will be 5 tomorrow, and his favourite player is Maxi, ASM. So happy birthday, Louis.
Happy birthday, Louis.
Happy birthday.
And I also just want to tell people as well, just to hit that subscribe button if they haven't done so already, and hit that like button as well. The red button at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is that subscribe button. So now I'll bring you some questions. We'll go to Carl's questions first. Do you guys think it's odd we haven't announced new sponsors yet? Legal ramblings going on of the values maybe, or just waiting for the summer so sponsors know where the club is, etc.
I think if you're trying to sell sponsorship, you're trying to sell it as a Premier League club. There is a degree of uncertainty. There's also a case for saying don't reveal your hand too early. It's also disrespectful, I think, to Fund 88. I'm not a big fan of white label gambling sponsors, but they're still paying for the privilege to be Newcastle United sponsor. I think it would be disrespectful for them to say, well, the deal is definitely going to be cancelled, and it would stop shirt sales now. So I think that's why we've seen that. And the focus at the club has been in respect of what's happening on the pitch. So there will be things taking place in the background. As football fans, we all want to know everything now, but sometimes it's a bit like waiting for Christmas Day. Sometimes it's don't open your presents a couple of days early. Wait for the big day, and you still can get a pleasant surprise. So it's a case of being patient, and being a patient football fan is one of the hardest things, especially when we've all waited a long time for good news.
Cheers, Kieran. Next question, we'll go to Shane's question. Are there caps on how many corporate sponsors you can have? Also, will salary caps ever be implemented in the big leagues?
Right. Now, you can have as many corporate sponsors as you wish. Take a look at Manchester United, Chelsea, Manchester City. And what those clubs have done is that they've done two things. They've divided their corporate relationships into what we might refer to as segments. And some of those segments are product related. So you might have a global airline partner, and then some of those relationships are geographical. So you might have a mobile phone sponsor in Thailand, in Nigeria, in Saudi, in Argentina, and so on. So you can have as many of those as you wish. In terms of salary caps, it ain't going to happen, because you need 14 clubs to vote for it. Now, if you take a look at the salaries of clubs in the Premier League at present, you've got clubs such as the two Manchester clubs whose salary is in the region of £350 million. And then you've got clubs such as Watford and Norwich whose salaries are £80 million. So where can you have a salary cap that's going to work for everybody? If you have it as a percentage of revenue, which is what some of the big clubs would like if it is introduced, are clubs like Newcastle and Villa and Everton and Leeds and Leicester, West Ham, are those clubs going to vote for it? Because those clubs want to compete in the Premier League. They've presently got wage bills of, say, 120 million. They're up against Manchester United and Manchester City, who have got wage bills which are almost treble theirs. You're never going to qualify for the Champions League unless you start paying the bigger wages. So Newcastle aren't going to vote for it. Villa aren't going to vote for it because they've got rich owners. Everton the same. You've only got to find 6 clubs, or you only got to find 7 clubs to vote against, and it's not going to go ahead. So I think it's highly unlikely that will take place. The only time it will take place is if we have a true cartel, and that's what they were going to have in the Champions League, and they were going to limit wages to 55% of revenue, because that meant there's more money to cream off for the owners, because billionaire owners need more money, don't they?
Just on the corporate sponsors, Kieran, obviously you see a lot of clubs now who get sponsors for the training kits as well. Obviously we've seen in the Premier League sleeve sponsors. I'm just wondering, is there any legal things for Premier League teams where, say for example, if you go to France, you see chest sponsors, you see short sponsors and stuff like that. Is there any way we might see that in the Premier League as well, and just literally have shirts covered in sponsors?
Again, if you go to the Premier League handbook, it's very, very specific as to where on the kit you can put sponsors' logos. And that's an agreement between the Premier League, the clubs, and also the broadcasters, because the broadcasters don't necessarily want to be giving away too much in terms of effectively free advertising. So that's where we are at present. What the Premier League clubs are wanting to introduce, and they get a bit nervous about this, is that they see the potential money to be made from two things: NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is where you can buy a 5%. Let's say you can buy a 5-second recording of a goal. It could be the goal which keeps Newcastle in the Premier League this season. And the club says, right, we are going to effectively autograph that, and we are going to sell the autographed version to the highest bidder. And so that's what an NFT is. It's a digital. It's a digital autograph. It's like having a signed shirt, but you've got a digital version of it. They think that there's a lot of money to be made out of that, and there are also these things called fan tokens, which. This is where I feel really uncomfortable. The club says it allows you to engage with the club. Well, I don't know about you, but I've been watching my club for 50 years. I engage with the club every single week. I turn up, I wear the merchandise, I buy the pies and the pints, I sing my heart out. I accuse Mike Dean of practically every crime known to humanity, and a few known to goats as well. And that's what I think is engagement. But the Premier League clubs, especially the ones with fans overseas, think that they can sell these digital tokens, and then if you can spend your tokens voting for the music at half time or the man of the match and all types of utter garbage. But they try to sell them as investment, and it's just nonsense. But there's always mugs out there who will buy them, and I'm very concerned that fans will buy them thinking that they're getting something of real value out of them, and actually they're just. If you want to have more engagement, go and buy the away kit. Go and buy the program more often. That's all you need to do. But it's for those fans that don't turn up. The clubs are trying to work out how can we get money out of these people.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. I'm going to link two together here. This is usually a question that gets put to Ben Jacobs, but it comes from Dan about Kieran. Is it true PIF are buying Inter? I don't think so. This is, but and linking that with interested to hear Kieran's thoughts on Newcastle following the Man City model of multi-club ownership under the NUFC banner. And I know you did touch on that before last show.
Yeah. Could they buy into you can buy Inter at a bargain price at present? Have they got are they in a slightly more advanced position in terms of the club development in respect of getting into Europe? It could be argued that they are. So that is a consideration. So you can't rule it out. In terms of the multi-club ownership model, the advantages of the multi-club model is if you want to get players young, I'm not a political person, but Brexit has made things more difficult for football clubs because you cannot recruit players from Europe who are 16 or 17. So therefore, you've got to wait for their 18. So what are Manchester City doing? They're spotting kids at the age of 16 or 17, and they're bringing them to their clubs in Europe.
Feeder clubs.
So you can move a player from Poland to Belgium. That's fine at the age of 16. So this is where the multi-club ownership model starts to come in. And then when you are transferring players, there's nothing to stop Newcastle United selling a player to their multi-club partner club in Belgium for £30 million. And you're going, blimey, didn't think he was that good. But all of the profit, of course, goes into Newcastle's FFP calculations. So there are certainly advantages to the multi-club ownership model in terms of shifting money around and parking profits where you want those profits to exist.
Yeah, Chelsea have found that out along the way as well with selling off or loaning out players and then selling them off again and then sometimes buying them back again.
Yeah,
I think at one point,
I think that's 60 odd players on loans at last season, or something, wasn't it? It was
yeah. I was going to say the same, Mitch. I think at one point it was like 72 players or something, and it was just like they've got them dotted all around the world.
And it's not just dotted over the world; it actually distorts the Premier League, because I remember, I think it was 3 seasons ago, I think Chelsea had something like 14 or 15 players out on loan at other clubs in the Premier League. I know we had one at Brighton at the time, but of course they've got a clause in all of those contracts that when Chelsea play the other club, that player cannot play against Chelsea. So it automatically weakens those clubs when they're playing Chelsea, which increases Chelsea's chances of picking up 3 points. So it's quite a canny strategy. And I think they've had to outlaw that rule, or they're trying to outlaw that rule, but it is messy.
Yeah. Cool. Look, there's one more question. I know it's one of our last topics that we're going to go to. So I'm going to bring up the question first, and then Richie, I'll let you go with your questions. And it's all about Dan Ashworth. And Simon says there's lots on Eddie Howe, his ways, means, and ethos, how he likes to manage, and what about his now? How does he complement Eddie? How are the different temperamentally? How does his role influence decisions? So I suppose it's really, how are they going to work together from what you know of?
I think it was going to be rude not to ask Kieran this question on Dan Ashworth, because obviously he's got first-hand experience of seeing him at his club for the last few years. So how's he? I think it's basically how's he going to work with Newcastle, and how's he going to work with Eddie Howe?
I think as far as Dan Ashworth's role will be, you won't hear a lot about him. You won't hear a lot of him. His job is to, first of all, determine the culture of the club, which we set by the owners, to make sure that applies not only to the first team, but also to recruitment. So you've got to recruiting the right style of players for the right style of play, to ensure that there is consistency in Newcastle United. It's no point having Eddie Howe saying we are going to play a high pressing game in the first team if in the under 18s and the under 23s you've got different coaches who have different philosophies. So one of Dan Ashworth's key jobs is to ensure consistency. When it comes to persuading academy players to sign contracts for the club, it's being able to go to those, and they are children. Honestly, we're talking about kids 15, 16, 17. They're still kids, going to them and going to their parents and saying, this is the pathway we have got for you. This is the support we're going to give to you. And ensuring that Newcastle United is seen as a positive option. And that philosophy goes all the way down to recruiting clubs into the academy at the ages of 6, 7, 8, and 9, and to ensure at all levels of the club there is some form of consistency, and there is some form of philosophy which everybody involved, in terms of stakeholders, we want to call them, the parents, the kids, the schools that they're connected with, they all know that Newcastle United is a progressive club, is a club which is going to bring the most up-to-date philosophies, technical, tactical, emotional elements of development of these young people as maximum as possible. And then those players come through to the first team, and you're not having to sign players for 80, 90, 100 million pounds because they're coming through the system. And that's Dan Ashworth's job, and he'll do the same with the women's team. So he is sort of, he always says he's sort of the center of the wheel, and the wheel's spinning around, and it's his job to keep that spinning, but to make sure that each of the cogs of the wheel knows exactly what its responsibilities are.
Yeah, I saw his interview he did with BT Sport a few years ago on YouTube last week. And I thought the interesting thing that he made out was the fact that when he comes into the club now, he'll be working to build the academy and the juniors, etc., all the way up into the first team to play under how Eddie Howe wants to build the team. But then, say for example, if Newcastle were to then move on from Eddie Howe, they would then recruit a coach that had similar philosophies to Eddie Howe with regards to how they've built the DNA up. So you're not going to go from someone like an Eddie Howe to possibly someone like Jose Mourinho, for example, because it doesn't complement what you've got coming through the academy and the way you want to play. And I suppose, as you'd like to say, the England DNA, which Dan Ashworth's famous for the way that England has been really successful over the last, half a decade or so because of what he implemented all those years ago.
Yeah, and it was England's success at under 16, 17, 19, which then you look at all of those players that have gone through to play for the England first team, because there is that culture of development. This is what we are looking for. And that does give you, and you won't see anything for the first 18 months to 2 years. It is an investment, and investments take time to get a return. And that was, as a Brighton fan, we absolutely understand why he's done it. He will make an awful lot of money out of it. It could be the chance to take a club to a higher level. Our ambition was to get into the top half of the Premier League. Newcastle United's ambition is to go far further than that, and I think he would like that. He normally says he needs 5 years to actually see results, and we were starting to see that fruition this season at Brighton. People have been coming. He's been here for a couple of years. We're still finishing 15th, 16th in the league. This year, it's all starting to turn into something good. And the players who we had signed, he's not been that good. Are really. We lost Ben White to Arsenal. We got 50 million. We're going to lose Bissouma this summer, but it's going to be for 40 million. And you start to see those decisions which were made, which people were questioning, all start to come to. But it won't happen immediately. And patience is the best characteristic that football fans can have, and it's the hardest one to have.
Yeah, I guess he walks into a different role with Newcastle, where in Brighton he had to work within a strict budget, I suppose, and build something, grow something. Where Newcastle is a project as well, but he has more funds available, so it will be interesting to see how he gets on with no, I'm not going to say unlimited funds, but we have to work within financial fair play. But he has a lot more to play with, so it'd be very interesting to see how he gets on with that.
But he's not necessarily in charge of recruitment. There will be a recruitment manager, but the recruitment manager will be told these are the characteristics of the players that we're looking for. And it stops that situation. I mean, you mentioned Mourinho. Mourinho's football philosophy was different to, you've had Big Sam at Newcastle. And the last thing you want is a new manager that comes in completely different to the old manager. And the first thing he's looking to do is he doesn't like 6 of the players. He wants to bring in 6 players that he likes. That's very expensive, and it simply doesn't work. If you want to, you might do a bit of firefighting on that basis, but you'll never have the foundations to truly grow a club.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because obviously just before we get onto the sponsors and close the show, Newcastle did actually announce a deal last week with StatZone, which is obviously that's going to help the recruitment side of things, regards to the players' type of character and stuff like that. So that's going to be an interesting tool that Dan Ashworth will possibly, and the recruitment team will have to look forward to going forward. So that just basically rounds out the show. So what I'd like to say is thank you to our sponsors, Black and White Army, Bronwyn. She's got a few of her T-shirts and bobble hats left over before a new range comes out in the next few weeks. Also, our charity sponsor, Shy Bairns, the mental health charity run by Simon and the guys over there. They've go over there, check out their fantastic hats and hoodies, all benefiting mental health. Mental health charities. And also our new sponsor, Pins and Prints, who joined us last week, who got fantastic prints. And this is something that Kieran might be able to look to as well, because they don't just do Newcastle, they do also do other football clubs around the Premier League, where you can get your team's favourite goals, etc. So stuff like the Kieran Trippier one against Everton last week's already been made to print. We can go to Papa Cisse against Chelsea in the early Pardew days. But then if also, say, for example, if Neil wanted a Neil Maupay shirt. You could go and get one of those made like a bit like this in blue and white with Maupay on the back, etc. But also like relevant ones now, like we've got the new Joe Linton prints and stuff like that. So if there's anything, Neil, Kieran, if anything that you see there you might want.
Look, Bonnie, they do. Yeah.
They do, but just that will give a big shout to them. But yes, if you ever want, not just Newcastle, there's obviously the New England ones and stuff like that, and as I mentioned, other teams are available from the Premier League. So,
use the code, Richie. Use the code.
You what? Sorry,
so you'll get your 10%.
Yes, code. Sorry, I completely forgot. If anybody wants this goes for you as well, Kieran. If you do find any Brighton ones on there, if you use the code LoadedMag at pinsandprints.com, you will get 10% off any order that you put in for them. So feel free to use that as many times as you want. It's not just a one-off. You can use it as many times as you want. So, guys, thank you very much for joining. Kieran, massive shout out for joining us again for your second stint on Loaded Mag. Hopefully, we'll get you back again in the future. It might be more towards the summer this time. Your third time lucky for you again. You get a third date then as well. But
I've never got as far as a third date. I can assure you.
I don't know because. We know you like to talk about football, and Newcastle do have Brighton coming up in a few weeks, so you never know. Pete might reach out to see if you want to go to away days and talk Brighton for a change rather than FFP. So if you're interested in just talking Brighton, by all means, I'm sure Pete will reach out to you in a few weeks if you're interested. But thanks for joining us, Kieran. Daz, Chris, thanks for joining us as well, mate. And everyone watching, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you have a good night. We have got away days on Wednesdays. Is it Wednesday this week or Thursday this week, Daz?
Thursday, and I have the poster here ready to go for away days, and also we'll probably be back on Friday as well for a Loaded Mag, and no poster created for that one yet. But we'll also be back on Saturday for a reaction show at some point. So keep an eye, and if you hit the subscribe button, you will get all the notifications.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for joining us all, Kieran. All the best for the future, and hopefully we'll speak to you before Brighton. But if not, we do hope you visit St James's as a losing one this time.
Thanks very much for the invite, guys, and keep up the great work.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Kieran.
Good night.
Now is the time. A time you'll look back on. A time you adopt as inspiration. You will recollect this time, this moment, right now. Motivate yourself to watch the